How one woman brought down a city's darkest secrets, a spiritual tale of truth, courage, and light. If she hadn't stopped at that little pushcart that day. If she hadn't smiled amidst the crowd of strangers. Maybe none of this would have started. The evening sun draped the city in a soft, rose-colored veil, tinting its dusty streets like silk soaked in light. The streets bustled with life, street vendors' cries tangled with honking horns, forming a chaotic urban symphony. Along the sidewalks, food carts lined up, offering humble yet beloved snacks, dipping sauces, rice papers, and tiny, fragrant treats. Amidst that sea of people stood a woman dressed in a plain cotton sari, her hair neatly tied up. Simple, unassuming. She was standing before a pani puri cart. No one knew beneath that modest appearance she was the most powerful woman in the city. No entourage. No bodyguards. Just her, and a heart quietly burning to uncover the truth. "I'll have a spicy one, please," she said with a soft smile, her voice blending with the breeze. The vendor, a sun-darkened man in his 40s with kind eyes, quickly dropped the crispy puris into a small bowl and poured over the fiery, tangy water. She accepted it, took a bite. The searing heat burst onto her tongue, sharp and salty, like the ache she buried deep inside. But before she could finish savoring that sting, a storm hit. Engines screamed, tearing through the air. 4 policemen on motorbikes sped in, their dusty uniforms grimy, faces twisted with aggression. No questions. No warnings. "How many times have we told you? No blocking the streets. You want a heavy fine." The vendor trembled. He clasped his hands together, pleading, "Please, sir, I'm just trying to feed my family. Please don't destroy my cart." But his words vanished into the void. A brutal kick. The cart toppled. Everything, puris, sauces, spices, splattered onto the grimy street. The little snacks, once sweet symbols of hope, now lay scattered in filth, trampled under careless feet. Her fists clenched. Blood boiled in her veins. She couldn't just stand there. She stepped forward, voice icy. "Is this how you protect citizens? By stomping on the livelihood of an honest man?" One officer spun around, his eyes razor sharp. He scanned her from head to toe, then sneered. "Oh look, a housewife trying to teach us a lesson? Go home and cook, lady. Stay out of men's business." The air thickened. All eyes turned to her. A heartbeat. A breath. Then. Smack. A slap. Sudden. Vicious. Her glasses flew, landing in the dirt. Her cheek burned, a red handprint blooming. Everything froze. No one breathed. No one spoke. Not even her. The woman who'd just been struck with a slap like thunder. She stood still, her eyes blazing with a fire that couldn't be extinguished. In that moment, she knew. The game had begun. And this time, she would not forgive. If you're still watching this video and want to know how she will bring these arrogant men to justice, comment the number 3 below so I know you're with me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I highly recommend hitting that subscribe button and turning on the bell icon. Your support helps us keep making powerful, inspiring stories like this one. The sound of that slap still hung in the air, cold as a blade slicing skin. She caught a faint taste of blood at the corner of her mouth, metallic and humiliating. Still, she didn't cry. Didn't speak. Only her eyes, like a calm lake struck by a stone, began to stir with rising waves of fury. The smug officer barked. "Tie her up. Take her in. Let's show this woman what happens when you step out of line. Two rough hands seized her arms. A pair of freezing handcuffs locked around her slender wrists. No one in the crowd spoke. They just stood there, silent witnesses to a shameless injustice. The police siren wailed, slicing through the fading light. She was shoved into the back of the car, surrounded by jeering laughter. Look at her, probably cheating on her husband. Or maybe she's a spy pretending to be innocent. The words stung like knives. But she stayed quiet, hands gripping the seat's edge. She had already decided. She wouldn't strike yet. She'd watch, see exactly how deep the rot went under those uniforms of justice. The car pulled up in front of a crumbling gray building. The station looked more like a forgotten prison than a place of law. Dragged in like a criminal, she passed cold stares, smirks, whispers dripping with filth. In a shadowy corner, a frail old woman sat curled up, her eyes clouded with fear. A teenage girl clutched her stomach, terror etched across her young face. The woman was shoved into a filthy holding cell, cracked walls, blood-stained floor, and the pungent stench of urine, despair, and hopelessness. Behind a dusty desk sat a worn-out officer, squinting at her. Want out? Sign this. Confess to obstructing law enforcement. On the table, a crumpled sheet. A pen. She looked up. Her eyes were no longer those of a woman beaten. They were the eyes of someone holding justice like a flame in her palm. I committed no crime, she said hoarsely but firmly. The officer's grin twisted. No signature? Fine. We'll teach you what happens to smart mouths. He barked an order. Two burly cops lunged. One yanked her hair, scalp searing. Another twisted her arms behind her. The pen fell to the floor. They forced her down, cheek to the filthy ground. A third cop shoved the paper in front of her, pressing her hand toward the fingerprint box. Then, a scream pierced the air from somewhere in the cell. Stop. Don't hurt her. A second passed. Then chaos resumed. She gritted her teeth, eyes wide, unflinching. No struggle. No begging. Only silence. Because she knew. Every moment of pain, every bruise would become living proof of the truth she was about to expose. Not just for herself, but for that frail old woman. For that terrified girl. For a world that had never been fair to the weak. They thought she would break. They had no idea. Right here, in this rotting cell, a storm was being born. Time moved sluggishly in the jail cell, as if every second dragged its nails across her skin, leaving behind invisible wounds. She sat curled up in the corner, the red marks from the steel cuffs still etched into her wrists. Her lips were dry. Her knees scraped raw. But in her eyes something had shifted. It was no longer just anger. It was awakening. The storm had stopped screaming on the surface and begun tightening silently underground. From the corner of the room, the other women whispered to one another, their eyes stealing quiet glances her way. One woman, her face swollen, leaned closer and murmured, "Sister, where are you from? Why are you in here?" She turned, offering a faint smile. "I'm from a place where silence is no longer an option." They didn't fully understand. But in their eyes something flickered. A spark of hope. Fragile. But real. Night fell like a damp curtain. No meal. No water. Only the drunken laughter of the guardsmen intoxicated with cheap power. She kept her eyes half closed, but her mind was sharper than ever. She heard everything. The elderly woman begging in the dark. the girl sobbing with hiccup breaths. The heavy footsteps. The metallic click of locks. And above all she heard her conscience whispering, "It's time." Suddenly, the iron door creaked open. A flashlight beam blinded her face. The night duty officer entered, holding a fresh sheet of paper. "Still playing tough? This is your last chance. Sign it now. You'll be out by morning. Otherwise, don't blame me." His tone was threatening, but to her, his words were now nothing more than a cold breeze slipping through a cracked window, chilling, but powerless. She stood slowly. Her shadow stretched long across the cracked floor. Her eyes free of fear locked onto the officer's. "I won't sign. Because I've done nothing wrong." Dead silence. Then the officer lost control, shouting, "Fine. I'll make you regret it." He barked at the guards. "Take her to the interrogation room. I'll teach her what obedience means." 2 guards rushed in and dragged her like a sack of rice. But she didn't resist. Because she knew. Once they took her out of here, it would be her turn to drag the truth into the light. They shoved her into a small, grim room. A rusty metal table. A single, flickering ceiling bulb. Another man arrived with a small electric baton, the favorite weapon of cowards in uniform. The officer stepped forward, bearing a grotesque smile. "No one knows who you are. No one's coming for you. You're just a rat in this maze." She lifted her head, a mocking smile curling her lips. "You sure about that?" she asked calmly. He froze. There was something in her eyes that made him flinch, a force he couldn't comprehend. The unbreakable will of someone willing to burn herself just to light the way for truth. Suddenly, a noise erupted outside the hallway. Boots stomping. Shouts echoing. The officer spun toward the door, face draining pale. Then, a voice thundered through the chaos, sharp as a blade. "Stand down immediately." She closed her eyes. A faint smile touched her lips. The storm had arrived. And this time, it would cleanse everything rotten. The interrogation room door flew open. A flood of blinding white light poured in, striking the faces of those who just moments ago mocked justice. Stepping into the room was a man in a senior officer's uniform, shoulders gleaming with golden stars. His gaze was cold steel. His voice cracked like a whip. "Who authorized this interrogation? Who permitted an assault on a citizen without due process?" The officer holding the stun baton trembled violently, words fumbling from his mouth. "Yes, sir, she was resisting." "Shut up," the senior officer snapped, voice booming through the tiny room. He turned to her, stepping forward. With a softer tone, he asked, "Ma'am, I apologize. May I ask your name? Would you like us to contact a lawyer or family member?" She slowly raised her head. Her eyes, after everything, burned with a sacred fire. She reached into the pocket of her sari and pulled out a small, firm ID card, simple, silent, yet commanding. The card read, "District Magistrate, DM. Name, Ksitigarbha." Silence exploded. The officer dropped the baton, it clattered loudly to the floor. Everyone else stood frozen, pale as ghosts. Ksitigarbha. The woman they mistook for a poor civilian was the most powerful authority in the entire district. The senior officer clenched his fists, face flushed with shame. He bowed deeply. "Madam DM, we are truly sorry. Please allow us to take immediate disciplinary action against all those involved." She didn't answer at first. She slowly stood, brushing the dust from her sari, as if brushing off the filth of humiliation. Then she turned her gaze to the interrogating officer, ice cold and sharp. "You think power is a weapon to crush the weak? You forgot power exists to serve justice, not to torment the people." Her voice wasn't loud, but each word pierced like an arrow straight through their hearts. Minutes later, the entire police station was in chaos. Boots pounded the floor. Phones rang off the hook. Journalists flooded the building, cameras, microphones, flashing lights everywhere. Amidst the frenzy, she stood tall, hair tousled, but her face radiant with a fierce beauty. The beauty of a woman who refused to bow. A reporter rushed forward. "Madam, may we ask, why did you disguise yourself as a civilian?" She smiled, a breeze-light smile tinged with steel. "Because only when I wear the clothes of the common people can I truly see the faces of those who wear the mask of justice but betray trust." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. A young female reporter stepped up, voice shaking. "Madam, what will you do next?" She turned to face them. Her gaze cut through the air like lightning. "I will clean house. I will show no mercy to those who abuse their power against the people. Today, I endured not for myself, but for every silenced voice, every beaten soul, every person humiliated in the shadows." In the crowd, the worn and weary faces began to lift. An old woman chased away by the police just the day before now clasped her hands before her chest, eyes brimming with tears. A poor man in a torn shirt held his son's hand tightly, eyes blazing with hope. They were no longer trembling ghosts hiding in the corners of twisted justice. They were being seen. And slowly, they were beginning to believe that one day, truth would no longer be buried. She turned to the senior officer, her voice commanding. "Seal this entire station. Suspend the entire unit. Begin a full investigation immediately." The officer stood at attention, nodding in obedience. For the first time, the very police who had brutalized her now bowed before the judgment of the woman they once silenced. A woman who had endured in quiet, only to tear down the veil of injustice with nothing but her unshakable will. She stepped out of the station. The wind caught in her disheveled hair. The first light of dawn spilled across the ground. A new beginning. The storm had passed. But what remained was an immortal vow. No one, regardless of the uniform they wear, shall stand above justice. News of DM Madam assaulted by police spread like wildfire. Less than an hour after she left the station, major headlines across the country screamed. "Shocking! District Magistrate assaulted by police. Where is justice?" When protectors become oppressors, a rotten system exposed. Crowds began pouring in front of the police station. They no longer whispered in the shadows. They shouted, "We want justice. Restore dignity to the people. End authoritarian abuse." Inside the station, those once drunk with power now cowered in corners, pale as corpses. The interrogating officer, the one who held the stun baton, trembled, white-knuckled, clutching the edge of the desk like a drowning man grabbing a twig. A senior official from the Ministry of Internal Affairs arrived, his voice cold and firm. "All personnel, both directly and indirectly involved, immediately suspended. No time for excuses. No place to run." Handcuffs clicked shut on the wrists of the very men who once cuffed innocent citizens. Those who wielded batons to terrorize the powerless now walked out with bowed heads, escorted by the thunderous chants demanding justice. Adti stood at a distance, silently watching. She did not smile. She did not gloat. In her eyes was a stillness, like the ocean after a storm. A gentle breeze brushed past her. She clasped her hands behind her back and walked slowly toward the station gates. Her steps were calm, but each one echoed like a hammer in the minds of the guilty, reminding them there was nowhere left to hide. No shell left to crawl into. Only truth raw, blinding laid bare beneath the sun. Outside, the people gazed at her with a mix of reverence and gratitude. An elderly man, back hunched, hand trembling on a walking stick, pushed through the crowd toward her. He knelt, wrinkled hands shaking. "Madam, today, we witnessed a miracle." Adi quickly bent down and gently lifted him to his feet. "Not a miracle, sir. Just justice, the kind that should have belonged to you, and to everyone, long ago." Her voice wasn't loud or forceful, yet every word rang out like a bell through the misty morning. The old man broke down in tears. And then, as if his tears had broken a dam, the people surged forward. One by one. Face after weathered face. They didn't beg. They didn't complain. They simply stood, filling the street in solemn silence, as if swearing an oath. "We will be silent no more." That afternoon, under DM Madam's direct orders, a full-scale investigation was launched. Ledgers were unsealed. Old case files dragged from the dust. Mysterious disappearances, silenced complaints, bribes hidden beneath desks. All of it began to surface. And with it, the names of those with dirty hands, from low-ranking officers to mid-level commanders. There was no refuge left. No badge thick enough to hide behind. Only one naked truth. Evil, no matter what it wears, will eventually be dragged into the light. That night, when the chaos had momentarily settled, Adi stood alone by the window of her DM office, staring out at the blackened sky. Wind whistled through the frame. From far off, the chants for justice still echoed faintly from the city square. She closed her eyes. A long day. A long battle. But she knew the real war was still ahead. Because evil never dies in a day. And justice is never fulfilled with just one victory. She whispered to herself. "Tomorrow, I will rise again." That night, the city was shrouded in an unusual silence. But beneath that stillness, waves began to churn violently. Not everyone welcomed Adi's unveiling of the rot within the system. Somewhere, behind closed doors, those who had profited from the corruption were gathering. Hidden hands. Powerful figures. Wicked smiles bloomed in the dark. An old man, hair silver but eyes sharp as blades, sneered. "Does that girl really think she's accomplished anything? A rookie who believes spouting a few righteous lines to the poor will bring us down." Another, overweight and puffing on a cigarette, growled. "It's not that simple. But if we don't act, she'll take down the entire system." A raspy voice concluded. "It's time we teach her a lesson." The next morning, Adi received an anonymous call. A deep male voice, cold as steel. "Stop. Or you won't even begin to imagine the consequences." She remained silent. The caller scoffed, then hung up, leaving behind only the eerie, hollow beeping tone. Adi set the phone down. No need to guess. No need to ask. She knew. She had just officially declared war on the darkest forces in the system. That same day, a series of troubling reports flooded in. A staff member under her command was suddenly hit by a car. A key witness against the police had his home broken into, with all documents stolen. A young street vendor, the boy who saw her get arrested, was threatened and told to leave the city. All of it? In just one morning. all aimed at silencing the puzzle pieces she was gathering for justice. She sat alone in her office, fingers gently tracing the edge of her desk. Eyes deep. Focused. No panic. No hesitation. Only resolve cold as carved stone. That evening, she called an emergency meeting. The room was packed. Every honest soul left in the system had shown up. Adi stood before them, eyes blazing. Tonight, we don't just fight for our own honor. We fight for those who have no voice. We fight for the ones who've been crushed for far too long under the boots of unchecked power. No one smiled. No one muttered. Only silence. Heavy as a vow. She picked up a thick file and held it high. I have enough evidence to bring each of them into the light. But we must move fast. From this moment on, every second we wait, we are walking a tightrope between life and death. Her gaze swept the room. Anyone afraid, can leave now. Not a single soul moved. Not one bowed their head. Only fists clenched tighter. Only eyes gleamed brighter. Like swords drawn from their sheaths. Adi nodded slowly. Then let's begin. Outside, the rain began to fall. Drop by drop. Heavy and relentless. As if foreshadowing the storm ahead. In the darkness, beasts lurked. But this time, Adi wasn't alone. She had light. And that light was growing. Unstoppable. Night swallowed the city whole. In narrow alleyways, the street lamps flickered like the dying breaths of those still trying to hide their crimes. A small team, 5 people, broke away from the DM office, cutting through the dark like arrows. In their hands were urgent arrest warrants, signed personally by Adi Varma. Targets: a corrupt police inspector known for taking bribes. A businessman laundering money for politicians. A fixer who threatened key witnesses. Adi didn't stay behind in her brightly lit office. She wore a plain outfit, boarded the vehicle, and rode with the team. We can't ask the people to rise if we don't step forward first, she said, her voice steady like a battle drum. The SUV sped through rain-slick streets. Inside, no one spoke. Only the sound of rain pounding the roof, urgent, relentless like the heartbeat of a city about to wake. First stop, the inspector's walled-off mansion. Faint yellow light seeped through curtain-drawn windows. Adi signaled with her hand. 3 officers approached from the front. Another group flanked the rear gate. Within 30 seconds breach. A scream rang out from inside. What's going on? Who let you in? A commanding voice boomed. In the name of the law. Don't move. The inspector stumbled out of his bedroom, face drained of all color. In his hands, a suitcase full of cash not yet hidden. The media team, already in position, captured everything. Adi stepped forward and held out the arrest warrant. Her eyes were ice. You're under arrest for abuse of power, bribery, and obstruction of justice. The inspector opened his mouth to protest. But Adi's stare, sharp as a blade, cut off every word. The cuffs snapped shut around his wrists. That night, there were no gray areas. Only black and white. Only crime and justice. Adi didn't stop. She signaled the team to move toward the second target. An abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city where the money laundering businessman was hiding. The vehicle turned down a muddy, uneven dirt road. In the distance, a flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching a van parked stealthily in the shadows. Adi rolled down her window and whispered into the radio. Team 3, close in from the east. Click. A nod. Then, like phantoms, the special unit closed in. Inside the warehouse, the businessman was still counting his stacks of cash, completely unaware that the noose was tightening around his neck. When he finally looked up, he was staring directly at a gun barrel and a shining government badge. "Freeze. You're under arrest." This time no resistance. No escape. Only the sound of rain now clapping like thunderous applause for those bold enough to expose the darkness. By dawn, while the city still slumbered, Adi and her team had already apprehended all 3 targets on the list. Men who once boasted they were untouchable now stood like scolded children, caught red-handed. Sweat mixed with rain on their brows. Fear wrapped around their necks like an invisible chain. Adi stood tall in the police courtyard, soaked to the bone. The headlights cast a faint glow around her silhouette. She stared unblinking at the captured men. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence alone, a woman who had endured injustice only to rise and deliver it back tenfold, was the loudest answer the city had ever heard. One night. 3 arrests. A system shaken to its core. She thought silently. This storm has only just begun. If you're still watching this video and believe crimes must be punished, comment the number 6 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't already, I recommend subscribing and turning on the notification bell. Your support helps us continue making powerful, inspiring content like this. That morning, the sun failed to pierce the thick layers of clouds. A pale fog blanketed the city, as if warning of something dark and dangerous lurking just beyond sight. In the DM office, Adi sat in solemn silence at her desk. The thick case file detailing the night's arrests still smelled of fresh ink. But within her, a growing sense of unease was silently spreading. Around 10 a.m., as she was preparing to sign the indictments against the detainees, a panicked secretary burst through the door. "Madam." An explosion at the central jail. Adi stood up instantly. "Status report." "Ma'am, the blast destroyed the entire holding area. The suspects have escaped." For a split second, the air in the room vanished. Adi clenched her fists. She knew right away. This wasn't an accident. This was retaliation. The darkness had been wounded. And now, it would strike back more viciously than ever. Without hesitation, she called an emergency meeting. Her voice was sharp, unwavering. "From this moment forward, all personnel working directly with me must change schedules, drive unmarked vehicles, and use encrypted communication only." Her eyes scanned the room. "We are no longer just facing criminals. We are facing an underground empire. One willing to kill, to burn, to erase anything in its path to survive." A heavy silence followed. But within that silence was unity. No one backed down. No one looked away. That afternoon, Adi led a cover team to the scene of the explosion. What she saw was devastating. The detention center in ruins. The air thick with the stench of explosives. Blood splattered across broken walls. A shred of fabric, part of a suspect's shirt, still smoldered on the jagged metal fence. She stood amid the wreckage, eyes deep and unreadable. A police officer bowed and reported, "Madam, it was carefully planned. They had help from the inside." The security cameras were also destroyed. Adi narrowed her eyes. The ones truly in control haven't shown their faces yet. She whispered both to herself and to the shadows, "You think a bomb will extinguish this light?" She turned and gave the order. "Lock down the city. Activate all checkpoints. No one leaves without being searched." That night, another devastating report came in. A key witness. The one brave enough to accuse the police of bribery was assassinated on his way home. 3 gunshots. No witnesses. No cameras. Only a cold, lifeless body on the sidewalk beneath a flickering street lamp. Adti sat alone in her office. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks of the old windows. She knew this battle, from this moment on, would no longer be about arrests or declarations. It was a fight for survival. A war where the victor would either burn the darkness to ash, or be swallowed whole by it. She closed her eyes, listening to her own heartbeat. Not out of fear, but to remember why she started this journey in the first place. For justice. For those whose cries no one bothered to hear. And for the vow she once made to herself. Never back down. Never bow. Never betray the light within. She opened her eyes. Sharp like a blade unsheathed. Adti Varma, the woman who once fell in the dark, had risen. And she would fight until her final breath. The next morning, a cold rain fell. Adti, in a long coat, stood by the window, her gaze distant through the white streaks of rain. Urgent reports from investigative teams were flooding her desk. The escaped suspects had split up and scattered across multiple zones. Several surviving witnesses were now under close surveillance. High-ranking officials, once allies of the shadows, had begun erasing their tracks. Each line in the reports was like a blade carving deeper into the grotesque truth. The underground network had rotted the system to its roots. And if they didn't act fast, everything would vanish into the abyss forever. Adti did not hesitate. She launched a special operation. Operation Thunderclap. The mission: simultaneous raids on 10 suspect locations. Immediate transfer of surviving witnesses to maximum security protection. Temporary indictment of all implicated high-level officials. No warning. No permission. No compromise. If you stand with justice, stay. If you don't, you'll be swept away. 7 p.m. DM office headquarters. The yellow light cast ghostly shadows across the cold stone floor. Adti stepped into the war room, eyes sharp as steel. "Tonight," she said, her voice low, slow, and heavy as a hammer. "We're done chipping away at the edges. Tonight, we strike at the root." A young officer raised his hand. "Madam, if we hit directly, they'll retaliate. There could be casualties." Adti looked him straight in the eye, unwavering. "If you're afraid, don't call yourself a protector of justice." A suffocating silence followed. Then, in unison, the team rose to their feet, fists clenched. "We follow Madam's command." 8 p.m. sharp. The operation began. Special units, clad in black, darted through the freezing rain. An armored SUV carrying Adti pulled out from HQ, heading straight toward a high-rise in the city center, where she knew the mastermind was hiding. No more underlings. Tonight, she was going after the head of the snake. The skyscraper shimmered in the rain. At the very top, a lavish penthouse, owned by a man known as the uncrowned king of the city. A powerful businessman. A glamorous philanthropist. And behind it all, the puppet master of violence, corruption, and death. His name, Ravi Maheshwaran. As Adti's car came to a halt at the building's base, she glanced at the stormy sky. Rain poured down like war drums from the heavens. The special unit stormed in. Boots struck marble, echoing through the sterile halls. The building's security team was neutralized in seconds. Adti strode toward the elevator. Eyes focused. Unshaken. When the elevator opened at the top floor, she was hit by the scent of expensive cologne and old gunpowder. Inside, Ravi Maheshwaran lounged in a leather armchair, swirling a glass of red wine. He smiled. The kind of smile that said he still believed he was in control. "Ah, so you're the one causing all this noise," he said with a dry chuckle. Aditi stepped forward slow and steady. Her boots thudded with certainty on the polished wood. She stopped just a few feet away. "No," she replied, her voice cold as frost. "Not noise. I've come to end it." In that moment, time froze. Two figures, two worlds, stared each other down. One, the light. One, the dark. One, righteous power that cannot be bought. The other, corrupt power that thought itself untouchable. A showdown the city had long awaited. And tonight, it would finally get an ending. Inside the luxurious penthouse, thick with the scent of old gunpowder, the dim golden light cast long shadows across the room. Two figures stood face to face, locked in a battle without bullets, but with the power to decide the fate of an entire city. Ravi Maheshwaran sneered, rising slowly from his chair. He stretched as if welcoming a guest to his home, not facing a criminal indictment. "Madam Aditi," he said with mock politeness. "Do you really think arresting me is that easy?" Aditi didn't blink. She pulled a thick dossier from her bag and placed it on the glass table in front of him. Evidence of money laundering transactions. A list of bribed officials. Proof of your ties to violent networks. And, she added, her tone cutting, recordings straight from your most trusted men. For a brief second, Ravi's face darkened. But he quickly masked it with an even more sinister smile. "And what if I told you? You'll never leave this room alive to expose any of it?" The words dropped like blades. From behind him, two silent bodyguards stepped forward, guns in hand. A deadly silence gripped the air. But Aditi didn't flinch. She gave the slightest nod. Click. Immediately her operatives emerged from the shadows, guns trained on the bodyguards. Overwhelmed. Outnumbered. No escape. No cards left to play. Ravi stood frozen. And for the first time, his face twisted in real fear. Aditi took one final step forward. Her gaze no longer resembled that of a government official. It was the gaze of justice. Cold, unwavering, merciless. "You have the right to remain silent," she said, her voice like sharpened steel. "But everything you've done will speak for itself." The handcuffs locked around Ravi's wrists. The clinking of metal echoed through the silent room. A small sound, but heavier than the fall of an empire. As the convoy left the building, the rain had eased. A crowd had gathered outside despite the cold night and ever-present danger. When they saw Ravi led away in cuffs, head lowered in shame, a single voice shouted, "Justice has won." And then, it spread, erupted, rolled like thunder through the streets. Justice has won. Justice has won. Justice has won. Camera lights flashed. The city at last awoke from a long, choking slumber. Back at DM office headquarters, inside the briefing room, Aditi stood before her team. No fanfare. No grand speeches. Just one firm sentence. "We are not done." She looked around the room. At the silent warriors who had stood by her through every storm. "Tomorrow, there will be more like Ravi. But today we proved that justice is not an empty word." The entire room rose. A thunderous round of applause shook the walls. Not for the victory, but for the beginning of something greater. A new chapter. One written by those brave enough to light a fire in the dark. That night, for the first time in months, Uti sat quietly by her office window, staring out at a clear sky. No more gunshots. No more screaming. Only the soft whisper of wind through the trees. Thank you for not giving up. She smiled. A rare smile. Gentle, yet unbreakable. Because she knew. Justice, true justice, was born from blood, from tears, and from footsteps that never waver. And as long as even one person stood up for what is right, the darkness could never win. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share one thing this story taught you, and how you'll carry it into your life. Your voice matters. Reading your reflections brings strength, healing, and inspiration to us all. If this story moved your heart, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue crafting stories that awaken the soul. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.